Hello, welcome to my channel, Word Vacuum, where we vacuum up words like it's our job, even though it's totally not our job and we don't see a dime from this. That's okay. So, for starters, one of the things I wanted to talk about is my favorite book, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Big fan of Colin Firth, big fan of Jennifer L. and the BBC miniseries Pride and Prejudice, but also the book is the best. So here's what happened. I was reading a Pride and Prejudice retelling and I hated it so much. It was so bad. It was really frustrating. It made me question whether I even liked Pride and Prejudice in the first place. I was confused why this author was confused. We were all confused. So I decided in a totally not unhinged move to read a bunch of Pride and Prejudice retellings and stack them up against each other, sort of see what are the retellings like? Do they all do the same thing? What themes are they pulling upon? Is it just like a marketing thing to say that it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling so that they can make money off of me? I am doing this challenge. Unfortunately, there's about 50 retellings on my list. Actually, scratch that. There's 49 retellings that I have compiled, plus the original, because I wanted to ingrain that into my brain since I hadn't already, and make sure that I'm comparing apples to apples here. I realized that to read 50 books is quite a challenge, even if it's 50 different books, not the same story over and over and over again, in 1 year. And I really would like to do this in a year or less. So I am sprinting a reading session in the first 2 weeks of January, and just want to say a couple things. Honorable mention to 2 books that I did finish right at the beginning of the year, the end of the year, and I don't really talk about them that much, but the first one is The Love Match by Priyanka Taslim, and the second one is Pride and Paper Cuts by Stacey Hart. So just honorable mention to those 2. I did read them. I'll talk about them some other time. Hope you enjoy, and let's see how quickly I lose my sanity through my ears, just leaking out all over the place on the floor. And yeah, gross. Let's go. Okay, so part of the fun of me trying to read basically 50 books in a year. Okay, actually, let me back up, because really, I think I have like 36 books left to sort of round out this Pride and Prejudice project. And doing the math, I was like, okay, starting in the new year, if I read 1 book a week, which is like a pretty fast pace, all things considered, then I can finish in October. And that felt like way too long for me to be reading all of these. So the alternative is to see how much stamina I have for my sanity. It's like, are we sprinting and dying, or are we running a marathon and dying, or are we sprinting a marathon and dying? So we'll see what happens. But so far, I have read 4 books in the past 2 weeks. Yay, holidays and having a little bit more time to do that. And this will just be a sprint, we'll call it. I just finished Dear Mr. Darcy, which is sort of like an epistolary version of Pride and Prejudice, more so told from Mr. Darcy's point of view, but it really covers a lot of different characters. And now I am on to The Secret Diary of Lizzie Bennet, which actually, so far, as of page 3, the prose sounds better than the blurb and the just general concept sound. It sounds kind of cringe, but it also has a vlog or like a YouTube series companion with it. And so we'll see what that's like. So yeah, come with me as we delve deeper into the world of Pride and Prejudice and its retellings. 3-minute video took 5 hours to make. Dude, not Bingley. Being named Bingley. Hello, it is a new dawn, a new day, a new life. We're feeling good. I finished The Secret Diary of Lizzie Bennet late last night, and overall, I would have to give it like a 3 out of 5. And for the record, I tend to sort of I think I'm like a generally more of a generous rater than a lot of people on the internet. I think probably it would have been a lot better, or I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I had read it like 10 years ago. It definitely like resonated with like that period of my life 10 years ago. It did feel a little YA to me, even though she's supposed to be in grad school, but she's like never lived outside of her parents' house, blah, 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 blah. I was going to watch the like video series on YouTube in conjunction with the book because it has that option. But then I watched some of it and it was kind of cringe. And also it was just distracting. Like when I read, I want to be reading. I don't want to go back and forth. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll give it another try when I finish the book, which is now. So that's pending. But also, I did pick up another book, Unmarriageable by Sonia Kamal, and I'm looking forward to it. It's supposed to take place in Pakistan in like the early 2000s. So, should be a good time, and we'll just keep on reading. Okay, so I'm like 15% of the way through Unmarriageable. So far, pretty cool. It does do one thing that kind of bothers me, and it's when there's sort of like cross-cultural discussions, or when the book is in English but they're talking about a culture where there's like other languages involved, in this case Urdu. They will put things in the other language, but then they'll explain them in English like immediately afterwards. And to some extent it's okay, I get it, but also sometimes I feel like it adds to the charm of things when it's not translated or explained, because then like I feel like a lot of times you can pick up on context clues, or also it is an opportunity for me to like learn some new things. The flip side of it is that when the author is explaining it, I feel like I'm able to read it faster and they're able to explain it in a way that they feel like makes sense to them. So there's that, but very interesting so far. And all of the like names are really cool, the way they sort of not translated them, but I guess sort of changed them up a little bit to maybe be more authentic. So that's cool. I am also watching the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, and each episode's like 5 minutes long, but there's like maybe 100 of them. So it's like it's very 15 years ago YouTube, which is cool and definitely taking me back, but also I'm just trying to get through it. And so I have it on like 2 times speed, as you can see here.
And I talk a good game, but sometimes I make mistakes. A lot of mistakes.
Anyways, so trying to get through that so I can at least say that I've watched it, because I do have a watch list of Pride and Prejudice movies that I'm hoping to get through, and this kind of counts as a sprint, maybe. We'll see. But so far, I've read maybe 4.5 books since the new year, which was started 10 days ago, and we'll just see until I like what happens when I run out of steam and need to take a little break. Okay. All right, so I finished the Lizzie Bennet Diaries on YouTube. It was definitely a time. I feel like that there were parts of it that kind of reminded me of like Hannah Montana. The pacing, I really expected like a laugh track or like an "aww" to happen at certain points. So that, and maybe that tracks with the time period, but then there were also certain parts where I was like, wow, this is actually really moving. And I think at the time it was definitely a creative way of telling stories, whereas now it's like YouTube is overrun with like all these kinds of different creative projects, not necessarily in a bad way, but sometimes. And so I did watch it on like 2 times speed. It was a little awkward just watching it generally, not the 2 times speed part. And so, yeah, it was okay. I guess I'm glad I watched it, but I am glad that I didn't watch it like simultaneously with the book. I think that would have detracted from the book more in a way, but interesting creative concept. One of the things that I am interested in looking at is at what point the like original proposal or declaration of love from Darcy happens in all of these different retellings, because I checked the original and it's literally 49% of the way through the story. And in Unmarriageable, it is, I think, 68% of the way through or something like that, which is like quite a lot later. And I feel like as I'm reading it, there was a lot of exposition, which I think was helpful, and it was like really interesting for the development of the characters. But then there's a part of me that's wondering, why was that first declaration so late in the book? And that really only means you have like 30% of the book left to like get through quite a lot of character development. And so from that perspective, I haven't finished it yet. I have like 20% left, maybe an hour left of the book, but it sort of feels a little rushed as far as the like change in character development and that kind of thing. So we'll see. But ultimately, I think it is a great learning opportunity for me, at least, because as an American on the West Coast, we definitely did not learn a damn thing about the partition in the 40s, I guess, late 40s. That is something that like is talked about very briefly in the book, just like mentioned. But I think ultimately it's because it's such a pivotal moment in time for the country of Pakistan, as well as relations with India and sort of other countries in the area, including our favorite imperialist colonizer, Great Britain. And so it's just very interesting to have that backdrop of, when they talk about it in the book, but what does it mean to be sort of a colonized country and have this English British identity, especially as language is concerned, but then also have this Pakistan identity, and also sort of the longer lasting cultural traditions that have carried over, not necessarily from Britain, but from sort of a longer period of time in that area. There's a ton of history from that area, obviously. And so very, very interesting, and definitely I'm glad that I'm reading it. So we'll finish that up and see what's next. But I am kind of starting to lose my marbles a little bit, so we might need to call it soon, and because I think I need to like read something else or go touch grass without Pride and Prejudice stories next to me. So we shall see, but more reading to go. Okay, so just finished Unmarriageable, and like there's always something, I feel like when a book is good, like even if it's not my favorite, the ending, it was just like really perfect, and I had a great happy ending and enjoyed it a lot. One of the other things that I was thinking about in terms of pacing, because I do feel like the last 30% is paced pretty quickly. I wouldn't say rushed, but just fast. And it makes me think about how difficult it is to take this story and incorporate all of the character development, not just of the main characters, but also of like all the other characters that are involved and that add depth and flavor to the story. And then also adding on the different layers of social commentary and trying to critique certain things and input that level of thought into it, as well as getting the pacing right, while also thinking about the fact that, like, why are you retelling this story? What's the new spin on it? That kind of thing. It's not easy. And that's part of the reason why I'm really interested in seeing sort of where does that first declaration of love come in from Darcy, and how does that affect the rest of the story from a pacing perspective? Because if it's like right in the middle, I feel like that's pacing pretty true to the original, and not that it needs to be there. I think it could be a little earlier, a little bit later. It's just, it seems to be a core element of the story. And so from that perspective, I think it's just interesting to sort of track what the differences are there. And then the other thing I have to say is that Alice, who is sort of the Lizzie Bennet, the protagonist of this book, she is fierce and like intellectually, I don't want to say terrifying, intellectually extremely buff. And she also is like not afraid to say what she thinks, like no matter the situation. And I think sometimes it shows of like, come on, like read the room. Like maybe that's not the most helpful thing to for people to hear right now. But other times it's like she's speaking her truth and gotta appreciate her for that. And the way she like is ready to freaking take names and kick ass when it comes to Bina de Beg is pretty impressive. And I was like, damn, you go. But also, I would not want to argue with you or debate with you in any capacity. So that was really cool to see. And then the other thing that I found interesting was how Darcy and Alice kind of have this mutual admiration at the end and this sort of respect and understanding, like deep respect and understanding for each other. And that's why they gravitate towards each other ultimately. And I think that's really interesting because I find that to be similar in the original as well, where like yeah, Mr. Darcy's handsome, and like Darcy in this one is also handsome, and he's got a lot of money and great. And Alice is supposed to be really pretty, sort of despite the fact that she has sort of darker skin and she cuts her hair short and she's older. But what I think is really interesting is that a lot of modern retellings are very like, oh my God, I can't stand you, but you're so hot, want to jump your bones kind of thing. And this doesn't really have that. And it could be a cultural thing, but I think it's also just really interesting. Like, not all relationships need to have this like thirsting lust for somebody else necessarily be the focus of the story, I would say. Like, it can definitely be there, but it was kind of nice to, it didn't feel like a traditional modern Western rom-com in that sense, and I really appreciated that. So I was going to stop here, but two things. One is in the acknowledgments, Sonia Kamal mentioned Jane Austen fan fiction and the Jane Austen Society. I might be getting that wrong, but anyways, so then I started looking into that a little bit more. 2025 is the 250th birthday of Jane Austen, or like celebration. So there's a big hoopla in the larger community. And also, I was able to get a book at the last bookstore when I went there that I felt like was relevant. I may not fully read it in its entirety, but I feel like right now is I'm interested in thinking about the larger community and not just like reading another Pride and Prejudice retelling at this point in time, like today. So it's called Janeites, and this was actually written maybe 25 years ago now. Terrifying to think about that. But it just talks about all the people who are really into Jane Austen and why, and sort of the culture around that, and how maybe how that compares to other authors. The other thing that happened was that I had Pride and Prejudice in Space on hold at the library, and of course it said like 2 weeks the other day, and now it's here. So I kind of feel compelled to read it. I may not read it quite as quickly or in a rush as some of these other ones that I have in my sprint, but here are the final stats for what we accomplished in the last several weeks. So, read some books and was able to knock down that percentage a little bit so that I have slightly fewer books to read, although I will say I really do keep running into more Pride and Prejudice retellings, and it's like kind of driving me bonkers. So I'm like officially saying like no more are being added to the list, because I feel like most people probably wouldn't encounter all of these books unless they're really looking for them. And in that case, you've probably read a lot of these other ones already. So happy reading and Happy New Year. We will see what comes next.